Hi, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk Risk, where our goal is to connect, engage, and inspire each other as we build a global community of risk practitioners. I'm your host, Naveen Agarwal, and today I'm super excited to welcome Bettina Brant, Senior Director of Medical Safety at Medtronic. And we're going to talk about the critical role a medical safety officer plays throughout all the processes, starting from new product development, post-market, and we need to take advantage of that. We need to collaborate with our medical safety officers, and we're going to learn about how best we can do that. So with that, Bettina, I'm super excited to welcome you. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm well. I'm glad to be here.
So, Bettina, before we go into our conversation, I found something very curious in your background on LinkedIn profile, that you are actually a board member of Hot Mess Express Rescue. It's a nonprofit, and I would love for you to introduce that to us a little bit and what you do there.
Oh, yes. Wonderful. Thank you. I am one of the original members. I was at Mission 1, which was August of 2021. It was a mom had reached out on a social media post asking for help. She was just in over her head, postpartum depression. Financially, she didn't have the money to pay for like a housekeeper to come in to give her that refresh. But she was desperate. She needed to start over and kind of get her life back in gear. And at that point, another social media influencer had reached out to that mom and said, would you be okay if a bunch of strangers came into your home and gave you that reset? And that is truly how it started. Mm-hmm. Since then, we've grown to a local nonprofit, and now we are a national nonprofit. So in 2023, we created a national nonprofit, and we have chapters in almost every state of the U.S., and we're working on Canada and Australia now. It's been very exciting to see women helping women grow in a non-judgment environment where you're creating that village of what we heard about as children, that it takes a village, and we got away from that village, and now we're trying to recreate that.
Oh, that is super awesome, and I really admire your leadership, not only in a professional life at Medtronic, but also in your private life where you are helping so many people. So I really congratulate you and wish you all the best in your work with these organizations. So Bettina, let's get into our conversation today. I want to start with CAPA, because CAPA is a big source of headache for all of us in our industry. It's an important process in our quality management system, but we struggle with it. We have so many findings from FDA warning letters, and in general, we find it quite difficult. So as a medical safety officer, first, I want to learn from you, what is your perspective on CAPA? And second, what role does a medical safety officer play in, a successful completion of a CAPA?
It's a great topic, and one that's fairly new for industry to include medical safety, and I encourage it early and often. It's important because if we're included at this phase, we can actually close the loop. Oftentimes, medical safety has been part of issue identification, potentially the issue impact assessment or the health hazard assessment. And then it just kind of goes away. And the wonderful engineers and quality and R&D, they take it, they run with it, they do the corrective action. And on our side, we don't know what the outcome of that is. And so now that we're included in that, we can kind of close that loop and ensure that the changes are truly addressing the issue.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes when a report comes in of an event or multiple events, that closing of the loop doesn't happen. And so we may correct something that we thought was the issue, but in the field, it didn't turn out to be how they were getting to the issue. And so it's still happening. And to prevent that constant cycle, okay, we tried this, it didn't work. We tried this, it didn't work. If we can kind of close the loop at the beginning, we can get to a quicker resolution.
And I'm guessing that by really thinking about the patient and users and how our changes are going to affect them, probably increase the likelihood that our CAPA will be more effective, right? So this is important. So guys, if you're just joining now, my guest today is Bettina Brant, who is the Senior Director of Medical Safety at Medtronic. And we're talking about the critical role a medical safety officer plays in our work, in our processes of the quality management system, and helping us do the right things by the patient. So Bettina, let's continue talking about CAPA. And this issue of investigations and effectiveness has been a chronic problem as far as I know. So can you share with us just a quick example of a CAPA that you might have been a part of, where from a medical safety point of view, you were able to bring in an insight that the team actually had not thought of?
Because one of the ones that jumps out to me recently was involving issues with a product, but it was highly focused in one area. And so we were trying to figure out, was it the product? Was it education? Was it just kind of a one-off, unlikely to potentially happen again? And so bringing our medical safety team into that allowed us to kind of ask the clinicians, and we actually ended up sending someone out there so that they could kind of spend a day with the clinician to better understand what was happening. And then when we brought it back to the table for the CAPA team, we were able to say it's actually almost like that Swiss cheese. It was multifactorial. And we were able to do the education in the field, help that initial resolution immediately, but bring back to the table, okay, here's what we did, here's what we found. Now let's go back to the drawing board and see if we can kind of correct it to be proactive, prevent it from happening again. And that, I think, is the biggest benefit. Is our true end goal is to be proactive in safety versus reactive. But if you're not reacting appropriately, we're not helping the masses.
Yeah. You bring up such a great point, and I want to make sure we don't lose it. What I'm hearing you say is that, many times when we are confronted with a CAPA or an issue, our first instinct is to say, hey, what is wrong with the product? Let's look at how it works. What are the components? What are the parts? Maybe an engineering viewpoint. But what I'm hearing you say is that along that, line of inquiry, we should also look at how people are using it. Maybe there's a, way they're using it, or there's an education issue or a special cause issue. Let's go find out what is happening in the field, right? That's what I'm hearing you say. And that should be part of the investigation, right?
Absolutely. Even small changes to a product someone has used forever, that re-education is important. But because our healthcare system is so large, at least within the United States, our teaching facilities, someone may train to a product in one facility that was not our product and tried to use that same training on our product, and it doesn't match. None for one.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that our labeling is wrong. It doesn't mean that we have done anything wrong, but just the way things happen. So this is the key insight here. And again, it's worth repeating that as we are investigating the CAPA in the early phase, we should also pay attention to the use environment, the clinician perspective, and how the users are using it, right? That's the key insight here.
Yep. And that's part of the benefit of medical safety is we have worked at the bedside with the products. We know what the clinicians are doing day in and day out, and we can bring that voice to the table.
Yes, fantastic. Okay, so guys, I hope you're enjoying this conversation. And again, I invite you to share your own comments and thoughts on this particular topic. Have you experienced this problem in your work? And what are some of the best practices that might have worked for you that you would want to share? I want to encourage you to participate and share your comments in the chat. So Bettina, let's continue our conversation. The second point I had today to talk to you about was how medical safety officers or clinicians can help us correctly assign a severity level, correctly identify hazards, and correctly identify hazardous situations during our risk analysis process. Can you speak to this in terms of what kind of mistakes you might have seen and the way you have you help people correct those mistakes. Can you share some examples on that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to having been in the field, working with the product hands on. And I have been fortunate enough to spend several decades in a level 1 trauma center teaching facility. So I've seen the worst of the worst, or the odd of the bunch. And when the team members ask, oh, this is something rare, I've been able to say, oh, I've actually seen that happen. And the shock on some of the faces that, oh, we thought it would never happen. Well, never say never. It's going to happen if we say never. So let's go ahead and anticipate that. And what does that look like for the general population versus a high-risk population? Mm-hmm. And that, I think, has probably been one of the mistakes that we've seen, is that we don't always account for the high-risk population, or the one-offs, where, okay, most of our population, let's say, if they were to get an infection, will be able to fight it off. It wouldn't be as big of a deal. But if someone who's immunocompromised, or is already in a state where their body's not able to fight like the general population, their level is going to increase, and recognizing that increase and ensure that we have that documented and what the next steps may be is very important.
Yeah. And this is a good point here, because, we should not be confusing the probability with severity, because if someone say, it's very unlikely to occur, let's not worry about it. That's not really good risk analysis. We have to think of the situation where, like you are saying, high-risk population may experience this at a high rate. And then what the severity of that outcome would be, we must acknowledge that. And then we must figure out what the probability overall should be, what's the probability in the high risk, and have sort of informed conversation about what level of risk controls we want to implement. We should not ignore it. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Correct. It may not happen often, but if you have 10 different device companies and it happened once, we should all have it represented in our file.
That's right. Okay, so one of the areas we struggle here, I know from my experience, is identifying the right hazardous situation. Like, we really struggle with that. Does something come to mind from your experience where you help people navigate that conversation about exactly what the situation is for the patient? And I'm sure with your experience, you might have come across that particular, scenario where you understand exactly what the patient is going through. Does something come to mind?
I think the greatest flag that comes to mind is oftentimes in the industry, we forget what truly happens at the bedside. And we joke that we create this wonderful, robust IFU that pages upon pages of information that we want the team to understand and know. And what's the first thing that happens at bedside? We open that product and we throw that in the trash.
Uh-huh.
And we don't pull it out unless we have a problem. And helping the team to understand, okay, if it is that important, that it is a step that they have to take, they cannot miss, ensuring that that's the first thing that they see when they open that product. Not missing those steps.
Yeah. And it reminds me, how we behave in our personal lives. Like when a box comes from Amazon and, we open it up, there's a brochure there, but we expect plug and play. We don't expect things to go wrong, because I believe that many of the problems that we might encounter have been designed out. So we have to be, I think this is what we mean by building safety by design into our products, is that if there's something so critical that if not done correctly can hurt the patient, we should figure out a way to include that in our design. So I want to talk to you about new product development. What is your experience like working with new product development teams as a medical safety officer?
It is ever evolving, and it's so fun to be part of that development process. But it almost happened by fault. And I think back to almost a decade ago when first entering the industry and being with some other colleagues in an area, and they're like, oh, we just finished this product. It's about to roll out. Do you want to play with it? And of course, we're all like, yeah, we want to get our hands on the new product. And then we couldn't use it. It was designed appropriately, and it was designed for a larger hand individual.
Okay.
And we could not grasp the handles and we couldn't close it. So we were able to, in that moment, make it work correctly. And they joke with us now. They're like, oh, we'll send you our new product to see if you can break it. Because in the hospital, you're often finding workarounds. And if you're not able to do something, we're likely going to mess it up by trying to break it. But we were able to, in that moment, before it reached a patient, say, hey guys, we're not able to close this. The handle's too big and we have smaller hands. Maybe we need to kind of redesign the handle to ensure before it hits the market, we're able to ensure that patients are safe in their usage. And while it stopped that device from moving forward as quickly, what it did was open the door for us to get in sooner to be able to provide that feedback. If it's this area, it tends to be dominated by these types of physicians or these types of nurses or respiratory therapists. And what that has to entail and play for the new product development is, are they going to be satisfied with it? Are they going to be able to use it? Are they going to find any challenges with it? And how can we get all of that correct the first time around?
Yeah. And, you're right, because people in the field will find a workaround when a patient is in a critical condition and you are attending to that patient. Just because it's inconvenient to you, you don't give up. You just make it work. And in doing so, I think mistakes can happen, right? Because we are trying to use it in a way it's not supposed to be used. So this is a great insight that you are bringing into the development process early on. Actual use environment, how is it going to be used? And are we going to be able to, is everyone going to be able to use it correctly? So this brings to mind, to me at least, the importance of human factors engineering, right? Doing it early on. And I have had many guests on the show with expertise in human factors engineering who keep telling me, get human factors done early in the development process. But let's be honest, it is not being done, Bettina. So I want to ask you, why is it not being done and what we can do to actually encourage our cross-functional partners to consider these aspects early on? And I know you work at a very global world-leading organization where these best practices are already there, but can you share some insights about how we can encourage this type of a conversation early in the development process?
I think oftentimes we're all perfectionists and we don't want to take something out that's not ready. Whereas if we're able to fail hard and fail fast, we can get it to the point that it's ready the first time. So if we're able to work in that human factors early, even though it's quote unquote not ready for human factors, we'll be able to work out some of those quirks and those bugs before we get it to a point that we're ready to actually test it. And that's what's important in understanding is we're trying to do more with less. We're trying to get things to market sooner, but we cannot skip the step of having the actual end user weighing in on what will be beneficial. What are they going to have to find that workaround for? Is it going to fit their patient population, or are they going to have to apply additional tape or different products to make it work? So if we can do that sooner rather than later, our end result may be quicker, but trying to understand that when you're in the beginning and it's sensitive, you're excited, it's new and informative. Nobody wants to hear their baby's ugly. But sometimes we have to hear that in order to make it the best of the best and the safest.
Yeah. So, this idea is coming to my mind and I want to share it with you, see what you think about this. I have a lot of experience in project management, and I feel there's a critical role for project managers to plan an early phase of sort of trial and error and learning fast and failing fast and fixing it in their timeline, in their project timeline. They should build it. If you build it and get buy-in from the stakeholders, I don't believe it'll be a big problem. What do you think about that?
I would agree with that. And a lot of companies have those clinicians already in their staff. So can they use them for that initial phase and then bring in the other end users at the later phase? So getting that buy-in and that information as soon as possible during that planning phase.
So guys, those of you in the audience today who have experience in project management or interest in project management, taking your functional skills into project management area, this could be a huge opportunity for you where you can help your projects succeed in the long run by building in this early exploration. So Bettina, thank you for this conversation. The last point I want to discuss with you in the post-market phase, where I know medical safety plays a very big role, because guess what? We have to report adverse events to the regulatory authorities, right? And I think that is where I've seen medical safety officers play a critical role. Are there any other aspects of post-market surveillance that you believe medical safety officers can also play a critical role?
I think the literature surveillance is an important piece. Again, we're trying to be proactive, but we do have to be reactive. So if we're looking at branded and competitive product in literature, as well as competitor recalls, if it happened to someone, there's a chance it could happen to us. So ensuring that we have in place those markers to catch it before it gets to that recall level or before it gets to that patient level. How can we ensure that continuous process improvement?
Now, to me, the one challenge that I've seen in the industry is bringing this information back into the new product development process. Like this is sort of isolated or siloed out in the, whatever quality function or people who do post-market surveillance or medical safety function. Can you share any ideas or best practices of bringing this back and closing the loop back on our development process? How best to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a wonderful team that uses the same system to record any literature that's been reviewed. So no matter if it's the new product development team, the medical science team, the medical safety team, we can all see the same literature. And what we're able to do when something is being introduced as being part of the development team is say, hey, we've done this literature. Let us pull that report for you. And that can be a starting point, whether it's a predicate device or any type of competitive device. We can pull that literature and start with that versus reacting to it later. So ensuring that you have all the systems in place in the same storage locations is very important. But also having that seat at the table, we're able to say, oh, we just read a literature article on that. Let me pull it for the team so they have it.
Yeah. And it's not just about trying to figure out what might go wrong, but it's also about what is kind of best in class in the literature that is being reported or in the conference that we went. What are the latest devices that are providing superior benefit while also reducing the risk? Like you can bring all this information back to the development team. So what I'm hearing you say is that medical safety officer really could play a critical role both in post-market and pre-market by being this sort of collector and interpreter of information and bringing it back into the system, right?
Absolutely. The voice of the patient is what we like to say.
Correct. Voice of the patient. Yes. So the question to ask our leaders in the organization would be, how are we including the voice of the patient in everything that we do, right? It's not that we must do it, but how? What is the how and where are the gaps? And I think I would sort of encourage and challenge my colleagues in quality and regulatory to pay attention to that in their own organizations. So, Bettina, I think we have covered a lot of ground today. I really appreciate that. I want to give you a couple of minutes to process your thoughts and, just synthesize this conversation into 2 or 3 key takeaway points for us. And in the meantime, I want to share a couple of announcements with our audience today. Guys, again, I'm very excited to see all of you here. Week after week, you are showing up, and it is very inspiring and energizing to me. I want to ask you how you are doing. How are you feeling? How is this conversation, this platform working for you? So I want to invite you to give me your feedback on an ongoing basis. You can share that right now in the comments in the chat, or you can reach out to me one-on-one and let me know. Because at the end of the day, what we are trying to do here is to connect with each other and engage and inspire each other and learn from each other. This is the purpose of Let's Talk Risk. So I hope you will be very open in sharing your feedback with me, because my intent is to make this experience really, really good for you. The second announcement I want to make to you is that those of you who might be interested in learning a little bit more about the post-market safety surveillance side of the business, which to me is going to become very important in our near future as we work with software-driven devices, AI, ML devices, interconnected devices, cybersecurity concerns. Post-market is going to become very important. So there's a workshop that I have just launched a couple of weeks ago. We just did our first session with the first 10 people. It's a very hands-on workshop that goes through regulatory requirements, through data sources and analysis methods, through signal detection methods and signal evaluation methods, and also how to figure out when to change the risk management file or update the risk management file. And finally, it goes into details of how to set up a very efficient operating process for the post-market surveillance process. So if you're interested in that, please reach out to me and I will share those details with you and maybe you can participate in that workshop. So with that, Bettina, I want to invite you to share just a few key takeaway points from today.
Yeah, the biggest takeaway would be bring your medical safety in early and often. The earlier, the better. That's simply to bring that voice of the patient to the table, because our end goal is to be proactive in safety and make sure that we're keeping all the patients safe.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective with us, Bettina. I appreciate your time. Thanks, everybody, for attending today, and we will connect once again next week. Take care.